I think we'll start off with a question of, like I mentioned, the recent merger of Ladbrokes Coral. And of course, it's created what some are hailing to be a gaming superpower. And some would argue that all the consolidation might be destroying the sports betting industry. What's your take on that argument?
I've never thought of myself as working for a superpower before, so I'm quite excited by that. I think it's a strange thing that people say it's destroying the industry, because actually I think it's the only way for our industry to survive in the short and the longer term. I mean, from the UK market, we are under pressure from government, we're under pressure from regulation, and all those things being blunt, eat into your cost base, eat into your ability to innovate, which is what we're talking about, provide brilliant service for your customers. So actually, it is we've talked about it internally about a kind of economic inevitability that mergers will happen, and we've seen it. Paddy Power Betfair, we've obviously seen. We've now seen it with Ladbrokes Coral. There is a strong view in the market that there will be more. And if you look at my old employer, William Hill, and I think Ralph Topping was on this stage yesterday, my old boss. They've tried a good few times in the last 12 months to merge or do a deal, and I think that will carry on. So I think it's exciting on one side, but I think the hard part is we have a very interesting industry in the UK. If you look, there are only so many people who bet. So let's call it the addressable market's maybe 8 million people in the UK, and at any one time there can be 10, 15, 20 brands going for those same customers. And we're not building the market so much, we're just literally trying to take from each other. And that just gets tough. And I think actually some will survive and some won't. And we're coming together so we can survive, be stronger, and go and get as much market share as we possibly can.
But in your experience, speaking of customer experience, what can consolidation mean for customer experience and product innovation?
Well, hopefully good things. I mean, that's part of my job. I have this natty new title, Chief Customer Officer, and my job is to ensure that we deliver for our customers and we don't get caught up just in, whilst an important part of mergers, obviously the dreaded word synergies, there's also a part of it which is about how do we invest better, how do we provide much better products for our customers, and also how do we learn from each other. And I think certainly when we were talking earlier, there was a very interesting day when we merged in November, when actually you got to get to see how a competitor worked in reality. And I don't know if anyone's done it in a room. It's the strangest day as you start to kind of get to see each other's data and get to see each other's numbers and go, Jesus, that's better than us. And certainly we can certainly see things that the Coral brand's done incredibly well, and there's certainly some things that the Ladbrokes brand's done incredibly well. And it is a very trite phrase to say, but it is actually true that we're trying to create that effectively that best of both worlds. Where we can actually, from our perspective, take quite a, I'm going to use the phrase, sort of giant leap forward, because actually we've got two very strong brands who have done some good things and have made some mistakes along the path, and we can learn very quickly from the good things, and we can dump the mistakes very quickly in the bin. And I think actually that gives us some brilliant opportunities to push forward really quickly.
I just thought I would also pull that same question as a poll to the audience. If we can just pull the first poll to also get your perspective about consolidation and if it has a positive impact on consumer experience and product innovation. So let's see what everybody thinks about this. Is it rolling and on? Anybody on the poll? Okay. So wow. A majority of no's. Does that surprise you?
No, because we're all a cynical bunch, I think, and it's changing all the time. I think there's a couple of things that are worth talking about. My view is, as industries consolidate, there is always opportunities for, it's not the right phrase, but younger, nimbler, disruptive companies to come around and take market share as well. I think that's the opportunity, because, so yes, you could sit there and go, bigger companies can tend to own a market or own a distribution channel. Or, for example, we've got now 3,800 shops on the UK high street. It makes us one of the biggest retail brands in the country. It doesn't stop the independence. It doesn't stop people still being able to do and play an active part in their industry. So I mean, I disagree, but now it's gone to bang on 45. I've read that right. So we'll see.
But speaking of innovation, how do you approach innovation? I mean, it might be difficult to say now that you're in the midst of a merger.
It's funny. Mark was saying something about overwhelmed marketeers, and it's his job to help them. And I think that's great. If I had any overwhelmed marketeers in my team, I'd sack them, because I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed. And Mark made the point. I think I want everyone to be really excited. I think there's just huge opportunities. The digital marketplace, customer expectation are just some fantastic opportunities to do some really interesting things. I think in terms of how you approach innovation, there are just. I mean, I wonder. Starting a slightly different place. When I worked at Yahoo had become such a big company that actually it set up an innovation house in downtown San Francisco that didn't even have Yahoo on the door, and you couldn't go there if you were a Yahoo employee, because actually what had happened with Yahoo is it lost the ability to innovate, so it kind of effectively outsourced it. And I think that's probably a really not a good way to be. In my experience so far of both working across both brands now, is we have some really, really smart people. And I think part of our role on the exec team, and I think some of the points Mark made about that leadership coming from the top, is we need to clear the way for those smart people with their good ideas to be able to get on. And if we sit in meetings and have steering groups, and no disrespect to anyone who runs a steering group in this room, or project managers, I think as soon as you start having those involved in innovation is pretty much dead, in my humble opinion. I think I actually sat in the meeting the other day, and there was 32 people in the room. I always count them because I get quite anal about this stuff. And we were talking about transformation, and I said, there is no way we're going to deliver transformation with 32 people involved. And anyway, I left the meeting, so I don't know what happened after that. But I think there's a point at which there is often, and it's maybe a slight soapbox thing, you sit there, big companies get consultants in to tell them how to innovate. Consultants go around, talk to everyone in the business, gather all the brilliant ideas that are sat inside your business right now with some of your best brains, write them down in PowerPoint, present them back to you, and everyone goes, that's a good idea. Those ideas are sat in your business now, and I think part of your role, my role, is to find them and then let them go and let them breathe, and however you need to do that is really important. So personally, my view is innovation starts internally, but you have to clear a path for it to happen. You have to get through all the bureaucracy, all the nonsense, steering groups, and frankly invest and let them fast track through business processes that might inherently be quite slow.
So I presume also putting together great teams with a mixture of knowledge and know-how is also of importance.
Yeah, I think we merged effectively in November, and we are still going through the process of bringing the two companies together, bringing through the two brands together. We are now working in multiple locations, both in the UK and obviously Tel Aviv and Gibraltar as well. So we have lots of practical stuff to sort out. My biggest concern, having been through a few mergers or interesting positions before, is the worst thing you can do is spend all your time looking internally. You cannot forget that the people walking past your window are your customers, and at the end of the day, customers pay your wages, not worrying about what job you're going to get and what an org chart looks like. And if you start doing that, they literally just walk past, because everyone in this room knows it. The competition in our sector is probably the most extreme competitive sector I've ever worked in, and there are everyone on the phone's got probably, I think at last count, about 3 or 4 betting and gaming apps at least. And if you're not doing a good job, you are literally a click away from someone else. So that's my job.
I just want to encourage also the audience to pose some questions. I'll ask one more, and then we'll see if people in the audience have a question. Because talking about being disruptive, talking about personalized communication, customer-centric, how is the company working with this now?
I think we're doing some stuff pretty well, and I think we're doing some stuff not so well. And I mean, I'm a pretty honest person, so I think we have quite a lot to do. I think it's interesting. Our sector, and I'll talk about the sector in general, is we are probably the best teams acquisition I've ever come across in any business. So certainly, if you've got good acquisition people in your teams, watch out, because other industries are looking at them every day. That comes at a price, because actually I think a pure focus on acquisition, which has maybe been a feature of our sector, comes at a price around retention and good customer experience. And I think we have had some pretty bad practice in the past around that, and we have, particularly from a bigger brand point of view, enabled affiliates, etc., to be able to use our brands in ways that we wouldn't necessarily encourage, and I think that's led to some pretty bad reputational issues in our sector. So I think we have to deal with that. In terms of personalisation, in terms of what we do well, you'll have heard about data is vital, data is key, but I understand the point about collecting everything. It's how you use it, right? So, I mean, I've got more data in my bag there, which I'm sadly carrying around on paper. Don't nick it, it's just there. And it's just like a minefield, and you just need those smart people to go, that's the interesting part, that's the interesting part. And then how we turn that into personalisation is, I remember joining Hills, and there was a large presentation we had about personalisation. It was like, I would be able to log on to my williamhill.com account, and I would see only the bets I was interested in, only the sports I was interested in. No one's doing that yet, right? It is very, very hard to deliver. If you have, let's say 100,000 actives on a Saturday, to deliver 100,000 different personal experiences every time those people log on. Yes, it's a dream. Yes, we will at some point get there, I'm absolutely sure, but doing it now is really tough. Some level of personalisation is the key, but actually I think you need to start in a different place. I think you need to make things work. I think you need to have a very slick experience. I think you need to be able to deposit quickly. I think you need to pay out when people have won, and I think you need to have a really stable platform. You get those things right, you can add all the bits on top. But I think as a sector, we're still not doing a brilliant job on some of that.
And the point of relevance that Mark also brought up to the table is
and as Mark said, I still find it incredible that I get junk mail to my house. But somewhere someone's done a return analysis on that, and they find out that it works. I think on a bad day, we have been as guilty as any other brand of probably sending comms that don't feel as relevant as they should be, and I think we have to get better at that. But for me, it's a never-ending journey, because as soon as you think you've got better, actually you need to get better again, and I think that's the hard part. Okay,
so we have some questions. Shall we start with the first one? What's the role of data science in creating Ladbrokes' Coral customer experience?
That's a very good question, and I think. So two things we're doing at the moment. So one we have, which is a brilliant exercise, and I highly encourage you to do it. We have mapped our customer experience, which is it is a massive wake-up call. So I'm going to say this, and if it comes out, it comes out. When we mapped the Ladbrokes digital customer experience, we identified around 71 touch points from kind of effectively when you first heard about Ladbrokes to when you have kind of left and never used us again, roughly 71 touch points. And then we did an exercise which is quite concerning. We then looked at the number of teams within Ladbrokes that were involved in those 71 touch points. 22. So 22 teams are managing my personal journey through the Ladbrokes experience, and you wonder why we screw up sometimes. So it was a hastening kind of got to get that resolved, and we're doing the same process across the Coral brand now, and we're taking it across retail, and obviously vitally important kind of multi-channel, the omni-channel experience as well, because actually if you don't know all the key touch points in your customer's journey, how the hell do you think you're going to make it better, and how the hell do you think you're actually going to innovate around it? You have to know it first, and that map is absolutely vital. And then what we can do with the data science is we can then plug all the data we have across all those touch points into across the journey into all of those touch points, and effectively I'm trying to create what I call, and it sounds a bit knobby to be honest, a live dashboard where we can literally see problems as they arise and good things as they arise, and get really, really bloody good at it. That's the dream. So
great strategy.
So it's a great question, and I would highly encourage everyone to do it. It's a very, very interesting exercise to do.
And which other sectors do loyalty the best that the industry can learn from, if you know of any?
It's a funny thing, loyalty, isn't it? I've got a friend who made a very good comment once, and about, I don't know if Nectar cards or Tesco club cards, and everyone's kind of held those up as being the loyalty beacons. And what was interesting is he said it's very interesting because actually they only know what you tell them, because actually you don't use your card at every transaction. So I don't know. Who does it best? I think if I say do loyalty, I think the brands that people and customers continually return to are the brands that are doing loyalty best. It may not be a card, it may not be a points, but it may be about that very slick experience. So you go to Amazon because it just seems to bloody work. In all the years I've used them, they've screwed up once. And I think, if you look at, BA used to be held as a sort of vanguard of, the dreaded, gold card, the badge of absence, I used to call it, because you're away from home too much. But I think the point being, they then downgraded their miles, and that caused consternation. I think it's about, as I said, I think for me, loyalty is look at those brands that you go to day in, day out, and question why. And if they've got you there and they fulfill what you expect of them, and they send you timely, useful things, then they're probably doing the best job of loyalty.
Brand loyalty. Which of the 3 questions would you like to answer?
I'm not on the games one. So, what key metrics do you use to measure performance? We are literally just starting to. It's an interesting one, the measuring customer experience questions, because I think
with the metrics.
Yeah, well. There's a massive debate about what are the key metrics, because obviously we have a huge BI team and we have brilliant smart BI, brilliant smart data, and we can measure everything. And again, Mark said it before. We can measure everything that moves, and we do. Working out what are the most valuable metrics and what are the key performance indicators is literally a process we are going through now. So you might take, from a betting point of view, you might take, average stakes per active. You might take number of there's many different ways, and I think what we need to do is really work on what are the 3 or 4 that we can kind of hang our hats on. And I'm sure if someone else was sat here from Ladbrokes Coral, they may say we're there. I'm going to say we're not there, and we're working on it.
And does Ladbrokes develop new games internally? Or
it's interesting for us because Ladbrokes has had a model of effectively outsourcing games. Obviously, Coral have had a model of building up insourcing games. So we are right in the cusp of bringing those two things together. So watch this space on that one.
Mm-hmm. And how comfortable are you, the company, with failures while you are finding the gems to
that's
make
a great question.
forward?
It's a great question. Because I think it's really interesting. You go to a lot of these speeches, and I spoke at Twitter last week, and we were talking about building digital culture, and everyone's like, yeah, you've got to have this kind of, it's okay to fail. Yeah, fail, go on, test your business and fail, and then see what the reaction is. Because I think actually it's not potentially, I think it's a very, very, very easy thing to say, and then there comes a point at which you lose a lot of money or you've wasted a lot of time, and then it becomes a very, very difficult thing to kind of go, well, you said I could fail. So I don't know. I personally am very comfortable with it. I think as a business we need to, I think it comes back to the innovation point earlier. I think if you are going to invest in innovation and you are going to give people some time and space, then you almost need to write that money off, in my view, and write that time off. And if you get something back, brilliant. And if you don't, you've written it off as you go in. But
True. And I think it's the last question here. In providing personalization, is there a risk of appearing intrusive?
100%.
I
think it's a bit like loyalty. Personalization is such a big subject, a big word. Just putting my name right on an email, does that count as personalization? Starting to tell me things about where I've been before and what my digital journey's been, and I don't want that. Now, and I think the issue is that everyone has a different value transaction that they are happy with about giving data. Everyone does. Everyone has different limits about what they give and what they expect back, and versus what they're happy that other machines or connected devices in their houses are giving. If you look at Sky and Sky IQ, they know huge amounts about what we watch at home. And they can bring it down to a postcode, which means that's 20 or 30 houses on the average street. Is that intrusive? Marginally, from my point of view, but other people might not care. So I think it's really hard. My view would always be, I think particularly in our sector, is always to be very, very, very err on the side of caution on that one. But maybe that's me being a low risk person.
There's always a fine line when it comes to that question.
I think it is. It's hard.
And more on a personal basis, just to round this off, in your great and long and prosperous career, what's the best piece of advice or insight you've gotten that you could share with us?
I think there were two things I think that I keep saying to people. One is about remaining curious, and I think that's that, however you take that phrase, but from my perspective it is, and it comes back to the point about overwhelmed marketeers. be curious, be excited. Like if there's new technology, go and play with it, go and get interested, go and get involved. Don't go, oh my God, how are we going to deal with that? Go and work out how you're going to deal with it and bring it to life. I think that's really important. And the other thing is, I think, which is, again, I had a very interesting conversation internally the other day around knowing your customers. Now, everyone will say, well, we know our customers. Really? Really? When was the last time you actually talked to one directly? Ask yourself that question. And that's not looking at a deck that's come from a research company, and that's not looking at data on the BI feed. It is actually physically talking to a real human being who is giving you their money. And I genuinely think probably very few of us do that enough. And certainly one of the best things, I remember joining William Hill, and I did loads of shop visits at Hills. And I learned more speaking to our customers and speaking to our shop managers than I probably ever did internally. My good boss, Ralph, obviously. Because they know. They absolutely know. And you bring that back into a business and you bring it to life. It's incredible. It's very, very powerful. So the people who pay your wages, talk to them more. It's really, really simple.
Thank you for that thoughtful piece of advice. And a warm round of applause for Kristof Fahy.
Thank you.
Thank you.